Over the past 10 years, I have been fascinated by the psychedelic compound NN-DMT. Out of dozens of experiences with DMT, almost every single one was incredibly beautiful, transcendent. But there was one experience that I had a few years ago that terrified me. It was so disturbing that it shook me to my core and left me feeling confused for months afterwards. In this video, I'm going to share a story that I've never shared before, which is my scariest DMT experience. I talk a lot about DMT here on this channel because I truly believe that this is a key to the evolution of consciousness. This can help us learn and grow. And at the same time, stories like this are an important reminder that DMT is incredibly powerful, incredibly intense. It can be challenging, and it needs to be approached with care, with respect. So that's why I'm sharing this story. I hope it helps you navigate with more understanding. So, yeah, this experience was a couple years ago. I was in my own home in a safe environment. I had two really good friends there with me, people who I really love and trust. And on that particular day, I felt the calling. I felt the intuition. I wanted to dive in. I felt like it was going to be a meaningful experience. And it was. It was a very meaningful, powerful experience. I didn't have any specific intention. I was just entering kind of with open curiosity. I took my time to really ground, to meditate, to slow down my breath, to slow down my heart rate, and just enter into the experience from a grounded, centered place. And finally, time came to smoke the DMT. My friend helped me. And I took the first puff, and DMT sets in such a rapid and dramatic way. I immediately felt this warmth, this energy just radiating through my body, through my nervous system, and this sense of vibration, like this frequency just raising. I took the second hit, I took a third hit. And after the third hit, I laid back and closed my eyes, and I was just carried on this wave of vibration. I mean, again, the feeling, it's like you're launched out of your body. I felt this acceleration, and I was traveling. My consciousness was traveling beyond the body, beyond Jonas, in a way that was really unique. And I had never experienced this before. As the experience kind of arrived, it felt like I was traveling into outer space. I recall very clearly looking down almost from this cosmic perspective and seeing Earth just suspended there as this blue green ball. It was so beautiful. The beginning of the experience was amazing. It was so beautiful to just see Earth there. And the feeling was very clear that Earth is not some dead rock that's floating through space. It's alive. It felt like Earth was this conscious, sentient being, just rippling with life. And we're all a part of it. Incredibly beautiful and deeply moving to see that. And then the experience took a turn. All of a sudden, it was like this dark shadow of fear crept in to the experience. All of a sudden, I remember feeling just overcome by this sense of dread, of fear. As I was looking there at Earth, it was like the fabric of space was just pulling apart, and almost I could see through the veil. There were beings there, these giant mechanical looking beings that were like way bigger than the size of Earth, and they were like looming over the planet, staring down at Earth. And something about these beings felt terrifying. terrifying. They were cold, they were mechanical, they were completely unfeeling, no empathy. You know, a couple months after this experience, I came across this image online. I just happened to stumble across it and I just froze in my tracks because something about this image almost perfectly captures what I was seeing and witnessing in that moment. Just these giant beings looming over Earth. And the sense was somehow that these beings are almost like these cosmic overlords. It feels very weird to put this into words, but it feels important. These giant cosmic overlords that were somehow controlling or manipulating life on Earth, that were somehow controlling consciousness on Earth, almost like we were livestock or something, like we were just being used somehow by these beings. It really freaked me out. I felt an absolute sense of fear as I was witnessing this and trapped. I felt trapped in this unfeeling, cold, cosmic system that was just empty of love and compassion and goodness. Almost like all the beauty and love that we experience as human beings, in that experience, it almost felt like it's all just some parlor trick to keep us compliant, to keep us occupied as we're in these human bodies. It challenged for me in that moment the reality of love. If this sounds weirdly like the plot of the movie The Matrix, it is, which raises some interesting questions in and of itself. Now, certainly I'm not trying to present this or say that this is real or that I think any of this is objectively real. But in the moment, it felt real, unquestionably so, unquestionably real. And the sense was like, this is the truth. This is the reality. Now you're seeing it. And guess what? There is absolutely nothing that you can do about it. You're in this and you're stuck. You're trapped in this game. And there's nothing that you can do about it. I remember kind of landing back in my body, opening my eyes, looking at my friend who was sitting there. I just had this wild look in my eyes like, what the was that? I was in a state of shock. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to freak them out. My friend's sitting there, but I was freaked out. Part of why this experience was so disturbing was because it challenged some of my deepest, my most deeply held beliefs and assumptions up until that point. My spiritual belief, my spiritual worldview just collapsed like a house of cards. Boom. All of my exploration up until that point, all of my DMT experiences, all of the spiritual teachings that I was learning about, my research into consciousness, into near-death experiences, into all these topics. For me, it was clear up until that point that somehow there's a goodness that's at the center of existence. There's a benevolence that's at the core. Light beats dark. Love beats hate. Something, somehow, love is at the very center of all of this. And I remember just laying there after that experience, thinking to myself, how in the do you know that? How do you know? How do you know that love is at the center of this? Maybe it is true. Maybe it is true that we live in some kind of cold, controlling, cosmic overlord system. I laugh now because, again, it sounds bizarre, but listen, in the moment, that was my truth. I really didn't know, and my belief system just collapsed. And I felt so disoriented, I felt like I was somewhere lost out at sea with no clear sense of where's dry ground? Where's my grounding? I really had to focus on grounding myself coming out of that experience. I really had to focus on finding my way back to love, to goodness, to meaning. That's how deep these experiences can go. I'll say again, it shook me to my core, and I gave up DMT. I had been exploring this, fascinated for years. I didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't want to think about it. It terrified me, it freaked me out. For months afterwards, I didn't want to think about DMT. A little while later, about a year after this experience, I finally got this intuitive sense. It's time to revisit DMT, which might sound crazy, but the reason is I felt that there was something unresolved about this. When I finally returned to the DMT experience a year later, when I finally worked up the courage, this is wild. But the next experience picked right back up where the last experience ended. That had never happened to me before. But what's so incredible is that it picked right back up in a way that totally reframed this first experience, led to a sense of resolution, and helped me find my way back to love. It's a wild story. So there's a part two to this. I'm going to share in just a moment, but just to say that in the interim, in that year space in between, I really felt the importance of practicing grounding, of the challenge of integrating a difficult psychedelic experience, and the importance of being in connection, of working with other people to stay level and to process the experience. And having gone through that, that's a big part of the reason why I feel so passionate about this work, why I decided to become a psychedelic therapist and just provide some little support to other people who are navigating these profound states of consciousness. And just to mention, if you're interested in exploring DMT in a way that is safe and supportive, reach out at the link down below. It would be an honor to work with you. Now, as I said, there's a part two to this experience because a year later, when I finally returned to the DMT experience, it completely shifted and reframed this entire terrifying experience for me in the most incredible way. I decided to do DMT again because, again, I felt this sense on some level that there's something unresolved here. And so I returned in the same space, in the safety of my own home. When I had that second experience, something unbelievable happened. As I entered into the DMT experience, I found myself right back in the same space. I was looking down on earth. I saw these beings there. And for just a split second, fear. But something extraordinary happened because as soon as I started to feel that fear, all of a sudden, it was like this scene just zoomed all the way out, all the way out to where these giant cosmic beings overlooking Earth were like these tiny grains of sand all the way down there. All of a sudden, I saw there is a much bigger picture here. There is a much greater cosmic web of life. Like I was seeing this bigger tapestry of life. And it wasn't in the sense that this darkness doesn't exist. But what it revealed was that there is a balance here. It put it all in context. All of a sudden, I realized that all that fear that I felt was just from not seeing the bigger picture. And it was so incredible. It was so beautiful. What I saw was this sense of balance. I saw this like harmonious quality to this scene where it was like everything is in its right place here. Not a single atom is out of place. There is a greater cosmic intelligence to how this is all unfolding. And it reframed that fear so dramatically that all of a sudden it was funny. I was laughing. I was laughing at the fear that I felt because I realized if you just zoom out, there's always a bigger picture, and that fully reframed things. This scene was so harmonious and so beautiful, this greater cosmic tapestry, this balance between light and dark. I found my way back to love, my friends. I went full circle. I went from love is at the core to absolute fear and terror, and then back around to love. You know, there's this saying that God is love. It sounds incredibly cliche and cheesy, kind of ridiculous in a way, and true. I believe that there's truth to that. I really now do stand in this firm, grounded sense that love is at the core. Even if that's not true on some kind of grander metaphysical level, it's certainly true on a human level.
Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about Archons harvesting emotional energy, otherwise known as Loosh, on this prison planet that we call Earth. I'm not going to explain in depth what this concept is because it's talked about a lot. I just want to talk about the solution to this. So if you want to research more about, the Loosh harvest and the prison planet concept, feel free. This is more of a response to its popularity and how I've noticed there isn't really a solution given. People talk about this, but they don't talk about the solution. They say they want off the planet. They say they aren't going to go into light when they die. They don't want to be reincarnated. They're not going to listen to any soul guides or spirits or whatever who show up after death and then try and guide them into the light, things like this. They're going to reject that and just somehow fly off in a different direction and not be reincarnated. In my opinion, that's far too vague and it's not actionable. If you're here on Earth right now, then this is what you're dealing with. And if you want to contend with this Loosh harvest, then you're going to have to make steps now, not wait until after you die to make a decision or push back against the established paradigm of control. I will say, though, that Archons, emotional energy harvesting, and prison planet are actually all separate concepts that have been coalesced into one greater idea or theory. Archons come from Gnosticism. The Loosh, or emotional energy, comes from Robert Monroe's work, and the prison planet concept comes from David Icke. So all of these different things have been coalesced into, I guess, a working theory as to what might be going on here. This is just one theory, and I stress that. This is just one theory. I would just like to address this theory with a different point of view and a resolution or solution. Now, when I say Archons here, I use the term quite loosely because other terms for Archons could be demons, it could be pendulums, it could be egregores, it could be tulpas. Essentially, they're extra-dimensional or extraterrestrial or astral type beings or thought forms that sustain themselves using energy, using emotional energy, using attention and focus. A broader term for Archons could be negatively polarized entities. They're essentially entities or beings that have decided they're going to be completely service to self, and that means doing things at the expense of others. Within this theory, Archons are essentially doing one of two things at any given time. Archons are either absorbing and utilizing, storing, taking away, whatever they're doing with it, emotional energy from people who are already upset, already engaged in negativity, or they're seeding or impressing upon positive people negative emotions so that they flip them into a different state of emotionality. Here we have Steve, and he's feeling a lot of anger. Anger is usually felt in the chest area, maybe the throat. So I drew a little red circle here to show that if we're feeling angry, usually we're feeling it in this area. It's in the chest, it bubbles up towards the throat, and eventually makes the face turn red, and you start yelling. You're expressing that anger through the voice, through the mouth. This creates an energy field around Steve of anger, and this Archon has arrived to absorb that anger and feed itself and possibly use it in other ways. This Archon has noticed that Bill is in a state of love or gratitude or any other positive emotion coming from the heart chakra, and instead of allowing Bill to reside in that state, he's now seeding Bill's mind with negativity. So this could be fear, this could be anger, this could be grief, but let's assume that this is fear. You might ask, why would an Archon attempt to flip your emotional state like this? Well, it's because the overall impact is much greater. If they only focused on harvesting or absorbing energy from human beings who are already maintaining and perpetuating negative states of awareness and emotionality, then people like Bill would impact others and their available food supply would dwindle. It would reduce over time. So they need to actively impress upon positive people negative emotions occasionally in order to help maintain their harvest or their crop or their food supply of people who are inherently negative. This is because people, places, and things also affect your field. If Steve were to enter into Bill's area, if he were to collide with Bill's energy field, Bill would sense Steve's negativity and Steve would sense Bill's positivity. There's something that happens in life that most people are aware of where there are people who are giving, they are life-sustaining, life-giving, you feel energized around them, and there are people who are life-taking, they're energy-taking. If you're around them, you feel drained. When you're finished hanging out with them, you feel like you have been drained. It wasn't a life-invigorating or life-sustaining experience. It didn't increase your sense of happiness or energy. In fact, it decreased it. That's people who are chronically depressed, people who are chronically angry, people who are chronically afraid. When you spend time around them, you feel depleted. So that would be, in this example, Steve would be depleting Bill's energy. But the inverse is also true. Steve would experience an uplifting effect around Bill because he's gaining positive influence from Bill's energy field. It really just depends on how resilient someone is to being influenced by outside sources. So, although the Archon is attempting to flip Bill's emotional state, if he's resilient enough, he can completely ignore the Archon's impressions. Similarly, if Steve enters Bill's field, if Bill is resilient enough and stays focused on his own sense of truth, his own beingness, his own desire for positivity, then Steve won't have as much of a draining effect on Bill. Now, I want to explain here that thinking and feeling arise within the mind in three different ways. There's deliberate thinking, which I have the symbol of sort of sequential deliberate thought. It's generally positive because you're trying to solve a problem, you're trying to work through something, you're trying to plan your day. These are things you're attempting to do deliberately. You've set an intention to think, and you're engaging in the thought process, step by step by step, and you eventually resolve that process. You come to a conclusion, you've made your decision, it's over. Another version of thinking or feeling is habitual. It comes up from the subconscious mind. It's a cycle that always replays itself, and unless it's interrupted with new habits, then it will continue to replay itself. This could be things like negative self-talk. It could be things like believing in certain paradigms or things about your life and your situation that are completely habitual, and they've been on repeat almost your entire life. They're things that usually have been programmed into you at childhood and now replay themselves in adulthood. Now, there's another way in which we think or feel, and this is the type that I call seeded or suggested. It's when something comes into your awareness and it is distinctly different from something coming up or something being deliberately thought of. In this case, it would be the Archon seeding or suggesting to Bill an emotional state or something to think about and feel. It would also be, if Steve were to enter Bill's field, there would be a seeded or suggested impression of Steve's feelings for Bill to feel and think about. And as I said earlier, if these archons only focused on the readily available sources of loosh or emotional energy, the opposition, which would be the positive polarity, would increase in influence and strength. So there would be more and more people like Bill, and they would influence people like Steve, and overall, these archons' food supply or emotional energy supply would decrease as time went on. But what's really happening when, say, Bill is being suggested an emotional state? Impressions from archons or pendulums, which are those overall energy thought forms, are resonant with latent emotional energy in the subconscious. We've talked about this before, where your subconscious mind holds on to reservoirs of emotional energy. When an archon is impressing upon somebody like Bill a certain emotion, a certain frequency, a certain thought, it's an attempt to generate more energy by spinning up the initial inertia of that energy beneath the conscious awareness. So Bill already has fear within him. Even though he's residing currently in a state of love or gratitude, something positive, that fear is still beneath his conscious awareness. So this archon is impressing upon him a resonant energy so that this fear gets kind of jiggled, it gets kind of disturbed, and then up comes into Bill's awareness more thoughts related to that fear. This was just sort of a suggestion in order to spin up more of the inertia. So here's an archon, giving fear to Bill, saying boo in a sense, and Bill is being suggested, he's being tempted, he's being given a temptation to continue spinning the momentum or the wheel of fear within himself. So this is the important part of the video, which I think people don't necessarily get into enough. It's what do we actually do about it? Well, the simple answer is we take responsibility. The archons and any other form of this sort of concept cannot override your free will. They can only coerce, cajole, or manipulate in order to influence their desired outcome. You need to learn to control your mind, which is your intentions and your attention, so you can always make proper and full use of your free will. So here we have Bill choosing, I'm not going to listen to the impressions of the archon. I'm going to instead choose love. He's going to reaffirm his choice to reside in a state of lovingness rather than fear. Now, you might have already seen this coming, but I'm going to end up zooming out. Every single time we're approaching a concept, I'm going to end up bringing it back to the core concepts. How about instead of separate entities and forces, what if we recontextualize the situation as the collective ego? So these archons within this theory are coming from the demiurge. The demiurge is a false god that creates the material world and that has servants or portions of itself called archons that reside over the external material universe, which would be Earth in this case in our experience, and in Robert Monroe's understanding would be harvesting loosh or harvesting energy in order to maintain themselves and the material universe itself. Now, what is all of this? All of this is Maya, which is a Hindu concept which means illusion. I've talked about it before. This is all just a dream. The prison is not the planet. The prison is your mind. Collecting loosh means emotional energy. This emotional energy is for sustenance. If you didn't have sustenance, the thing that needs the sustenance would cease to be. So we think, okay, the archons would stop being. They need sustenance, they need our emotional energy. If they don't get it, they're going to disappear, they're going to dissolve, they're going to die. All right, then the demiurge would die. Well, if the demiurge would die, the demiurge is the creator, the false creator god of this external material universe. If he were to die, then separation would cease to be, and then illusion would cease to be. So you can see here that it's all a metaphor. If you think about this as a metaphorical explanation of what's going on, then it's far less daunting, far less scary, and you can actually approach the problem with actionable solutions. So just for illustration's sake, I have Bill sleeping and he's dreaming his life. He's dreaming the scenario of going over to Steve's house and having to interact with somebody who's, in this example, negative. Now, we know Steve's been doing a lot of work on himself, so maybe he's not always like this anymore, but he's going over to Steve's house and he feels, okay, I'm going to be around Steve. I know he's a negative guy. his house feels negative. But all of this stuff is part of the dream. It's part of Maya. It's part of the illusion. You can step back and witness the experience within this recontextualization. You don't have to always believe that you're the person dealing with the world all on your own, as if it's, life or death. You have to run away from the light. You have to say no to the archons. You have to escape this prison planet. Do you realize how many concepts are being spun up here and invested in with belief and emotional energy in and of themselves? Archons only exist within your mind. The prison planet only exists within your mind. If you relinquish all of your belief from these concepts, instead recontextualize it, there's no such thing as an external reality. Internal and external are the exact same thing. They're one of the same. Material universe is Maya. These portions of the demiurge are portions of the collective ego. This is the core of the ego, the false god, the one who thinks they've created life itself and created the universe. This is the ego. It wants to take credit for your awareness. It wants to take credit for everything you do. It wants to blame you for everything you do wrong. It wants to take credit for life itself. Portions or servants of the ego are the ones draining or stealing your emotional energy. When you invest your attention in an emotional energy reservoir, what you're doing is investing your attention in these archons. You're giving away your emotional energy and your attention to these archons, and you're allowing them to harvest your loosh. Here is manifest reality. Here's the external world. Here is where the demiurge lives. This is the core of the ego, which is the void. It believes that it has given you your awareness, as I've said in the last video. The ego itself is an idea and a belief, but it tries to convince you that you're the ego while simultaneously taking credit for all of life. It wants to usurp the power of God and call itself God. If you think about Gnosticism, what is the demiurge? The demiurge is a false creator god. The ego is a false creator. It wants to usurp the power of God. Same as a demiurge. So you can see that this is a metaphor. These archons are a metaphor for portions of the ego. These are the aspects of ego-ness that perpetuate the core of the ego. The external material universe is a dream, an illusion. It's Maya. We believe that it's external. We imbue the material universe with our belief. We believe in the manifest reality. Put reality in quotes because it's not actual reality. It's like believing a dream is reality. But when you wake up from the dream, when you relinquish all of your attention from the picture of this manifest reality, it dissolves and now you're in the void. Now you're the formless, unconditioned, unmanifest awareness. If you were to be able to relinquish even your belief from the ego as the creative force, then you would realize the self with a capital S, as I described in my last video. So going back to this picture, maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't. What's all this inside of? This plain box, which I've used in the past over and over to help illustrate that it's all happening within the same thing. It's all happening within God, which is self with a capital S. When people say, I want off this planet, when they say, I'm not going into the light, what are they even talking about? How are they going to do that? That's my question. A big HOW. How? If you don't have a game plan now as to how you're going to relinquish your attention, relinquish your focus on this stuff now, how are you going to do it when you die? When you exit the body and suddenly you're presented with the option to go into the light, you're being pressured by external entities, corralled into this light, and you're going to suddenly have all of the fortitude, all of the resilience of mind, all of the discipline to decide not to go into that light. You have to practice now. You have to practice relinquishing your attention and your focus from these deleterious negative emotional states now while you're alive, so that you have the fortitude and the discipline to slow down, be present, and experience really what's going on rather than what you perceive is going on. As I said, this is an illusion. This is an illusion. It's all happening within this. If you are able to realize the truth of this now, you're not going to have to worry about not going into the light because you know it's not even real. No matter what the situation is, you always have a choice. You can either choose to engage in fear-based energies or you can choose to engage in love-based energies. When these archons impress upon you ideas, thoughts, emotions that are fear-based, just choose to focus on love instead. Let go of what's arising that has to do with fear. Surrender that. Give that up. Don't engage in it. Instead, regather your focus and place it upon things that are loving. So just to reiterate, right here in Manifest Reality, that's where the prison planet is taking place. That's where all of this concept of prison planet, archons, loosh, emotional energy harvesting is taking place. When I say it's not real, when I say going into the light is not real, I'm talking about its relative reality compared to the self with a capital S, compared to the totality of the created universe and your available perspective. So if you're operating from this place where you sense the archon, you sense impressions, you sense energy fields of other people, it's completely okay to operate from that place. Just choose love instead of fear. Choose to forgive, choose to let go, choose to surrender things that are deleterious to you, and to maintaining the practice and maintaining high vibrational emotional states. But if you're able to remember and recognize the totality, the more absolute reality that includes manifest reality, then you can operate from that place as well. And this might oscillate for you. You might spend a lot of time focused on the body, focused on maybe the observer role, focused on what you sense from other people and places and archons. That's totally fine. But if you step back sometimes and sense that, oh, it's all one, I can sense the oneness, that's also completely okay. You can operate from that paradigm as well, where you're still going to be loving, forgiving, accepting. You're going to surrender anything that's deleterious, and you're going to cultivate that awareness of the self, that awareness of the more absolute reality. So I hope this helped. I hope it wasn't confusing to show you both levels of perception on this concept. Operate from wherever you can. Always choose love instead of fear. Please like the video because it helps the algorithm, and I'll see you in the next one.